Welcome to another week in the Relief Valve podcast, my friends. We are 2 weeks out from the election here in the good old US of A, and I hope that each and every one of you are getting your plan together to safely vote. Now, mostly I try to keep politics out of this podcast, but today I'm going to make a little bit of an exception. I promise it'll be brief and it'll be painless. So I hope you'll stay with me because my guest is a fantastic lady that does great things and is worth taking the time to listen to. Okay, first off, in normal times, I would tell you, I don't care who you vote for. Just make sure you vote. And as much as this year I really do care who you vote for, I'm still going to say it. Because I sincerely believe that you having a right to vote as you choose without risk of disenfranchisement is the cornerstone of a modern civilization. Not everybody out there in our leadership feels the same. The stock market is not the economy. We can have a whole discussion about that later on. You can dramatically reduce the spread of the coronavirus by just wearing a damn mask. And anyone who tells you otherwise is flat out lying to you. Yeah, it's an inconvenience. You know what? Many things in life are inconvenient. Get over it. The sooner we get rid of this thing, the sooner we get to go back out of our houses and have normal lives again. We can't have a society or civilization, for that matter, if we don't at least try to get along. It's okay to differ in our beliefs, but if you give in to the hate, which is being used to manipulate you, then the game is over. And make no mistake, friends, when you give in to the hate, you are being manipulated. And lastly, and this is really important to me, if some asshat shows up at your polls, garnishing an automatic weapon designed to intimidate you, be a patriot. Say, "Excuse me, sir," and walk by them. Be good to each other, and above all else, vote. Because this year, our lives really do depend on it. Jen Lee Reeves is co-founder and executive director of Born Just Right, which evolved from her experience as a parent and led her to work as an ally in the disability community. When she isn't working for Born Just Right, she's a digital director at the University of Missouri and a training consultant. She's an alumna of the social strategy team at A.A.R.P in Washington, D.C., and also spent years as a television news producer. Jen taught digital journalism at the Missouri School of Journalism while managing an NBC affiliate newsroom. To relax, Jen loves to travel with her family of 4, including her husband Randy. Take photos of the beauty around her and enjoy music and good food. Hi, Jen. Thanks for joining the podcast today.
Thanks, Jeff. It's great to be here.
So how's life in the great American Midwest these days?
Well, just like everything, it's a little weird. I do have to say that I feel being in the Midwest is a bit of a gift and a curse at the same time. It took longer for viral levels to get here, so that had its pros and cons. I think I really appreciate that I live in an environment where there's distance and I can walk and not always need to have a mask on, and I have a backyard that looks at a lake, which is something I could not afford anywhere else in the country. So that's a gift. But yeah, I think reality is the reality that we have everywhere. I think the one thing that's maybe different is that it just took a little longer for the reality to hit over here.
Yeah. LA has been a roller coaster from the beginning with all of this. We had the panic when it first hit, and then we went into this mode of flattening the curve, which most people didn't get what flattening the curve really meant, right? For the idea behind it was keep the hospitals from becoming overwhelmed.
Right.
It's not like we were ever going to stop the virus from spreading. We can't do that. Well, we can wear masks. And details, right? And then, of course, out here, we've got diverse opinions that people have about things. And the frustrating part about it is there's a common sense element that's missing to diverse opinions, because
Yeah.
it's it's not about proving the other guy is a snowflake or is wrong or is the other thing. It's about if there's a virus that needs a human body to incubate in, and that human body spreads it by basically spitting on each other. If we cover our mouths and noses so that we can't spit on each other, the virus has nowhere to go and it will die off.
Right.
I don't understand why for many folks this is difficult, but apparently it is.
It sounds so logical when you say it that
Yeah.
way. I don't know why.
Yeah.
So yeah, I live in a college town, and so at the beginning, the town emptied because the campus emptied.
Okay.
Students were sent home, and campus closed. The only people that were still on campus were students who had nowhere else to go, and a certain small level of people helping them stay fed and cared for. We have a hospital system that continued to function and function well when everything was closed, and it's still doing okay. But our town's economy really relies on that university system, and so
Okay.
and we have a state government that has still does not require masks. We have a governor who got the virus. We have, and his wife. We have rules have fallen on county level in the state and city level
Yeah.
and household level. So the university did reopen with some pretty stringent rules, but not mandated testing. And I will have to say, the current state of our national government is proof that testing's not really the answer anyway.
Yeah. So I'm going to interrupt for a second, because so one of the challenges of doing this particular podcast this year has been I record these in advance, right? Because they aren't necessarily meant to be news based, but the way the world is operating, there's a lot of markers in time that keep getting hit. So for the audience out there, I want you to know it's Saturday, October 3rd when we're recording this.
Yes.
And it is the weekend that the President of the United States was announced to have had COVID and is in the hospital now. And we're watching, as a nation, the dominoes start to fall in Washington, D.C. for what I am going on record as saying is the carelessness of a national government that just doesn't want to do the right thing and is therefore now making most of the executive branch sick to the point of possibly dying.
Yeah.
But I'm adding the time marker here because
I appreciate that. Yeah.
You know, I've had that happen before. I recorded 6 episodes before I went up on a stream with this.
Yeah.
And the very first episode I recorded, because the pandemic's part of the topic of it, was very time specific. And I'm like, oh my God, that was like a lifetime ago, because this is 2020, right? And every minute in 2020 is a year. So,
right.
But this one was worth noting that's why.
That's an important note, because this is definitely a long-term impact in our society and our nation. But I do think that the microcosm exists. Missouri is a microcosm of that. And the way our town has had to respond to the lack of national and state level reality has forced the state-funded land grant university to reopen. There's no other choice. And you bring in the most cavalier age group to repopulate the town, you're going to see numbers jump. And we did see numbers jump. And now this is the scary part, because isolation and quarantining sucks and the students didn't like the experience, they just stopped getting tested. So we now my entire town is now at risk of a community spread. So now it's real scary. And once again, very happy. I live in a home that is by a lake, that I have space to be outside, that I can live in a house where my family can have its own rooms and be away from each other if we need. It is a privilege that I do not let go. I appreciate and acknowledge it every day.
That is what I refer to when I refer to a relief valve. It's having your own room to go hide in. My own room is my garage. That's where I hang out all day, every day, because that's all I got.
But
Let's,
it's great. You had
yep.
it.
Yeah. All right. Let's step back for a second. And why don't you tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I am a strange, I think I've now decided I am a communications unicorn. I have always based my career and my life activities based on trying to be a good human, try to make an impact in the world. And so my first choice in my career was to be a journalist because I believe in journalism and I believe in how information is an important part of propelling a community forward. And I believe in the impact that information can give. And in this day and
Yeah.
age, I could not say I just believe in it more.
Yep.
Um, but so my career started in journalism and in broadcast journalism. But I went into broadcast journalism because I believed it would reach the most people in the most effective way. And that's why I went into the world of journalism and broadcast. And in that process, I learned that I really like to lead it and not just create the content, but lead it. So I used to
Yeah.
be a television news producer. I worked in a number of markets in California, Michigan, and then I ended up teaching how to produce newscasts. And a newscast producer is the person who thinks of the big picture. They think about the audience. They work with each individual journalist that's a part of that newscast, coordinating with the directors and the production staff and your anchors.
Yep.
And I really love that process. And I taught it at the Missouri School of Journalism for 9.5 years after I had a career in it, but ahead of that. While I was teaching that, I fell into the world of podcasting, actually, is what kind of turned my career into a different direction. I helped podcast the world's first podcasted conference with Apple in January of 2005, which shows me that I am old. But
No,
the
no,
concept of
I'm old. Which conference was that?
it's called EDUCAUSE, is a national organization that oversees the .edu domains, and
Oh, okay.
it is the behind the scenes tech guru of higher ed. And it's really a tremendous organization. And I was really lucky to be a part of helping higher ed understand the concept of push, that content can come to you instead of you go to it. And that whole global concept was so mind blowing in 2005 that I
Yeah.
went back to the Missouri School of Journalism and became a total preacher of recognizing that the tools that were emerging at that time were powerful, important, and needed to be leveraged in the world of journalism. So I became the uber social media nerd of the Missouri School of Journalism and probably at the University of Missouri.
Okay.
And I really believe in it still. And so I'm sad to see how some of these tools have been
Yeah.
abused.
Yeah.
I'm sad to see how people are okay with it and or don't pay attention to digital literacy and educating themselves around that space. But at its core, I'll be honest, Jeff, I wouldn't know you without it. Like
You're absolutely right. We
I
met on
just
Facebook. So,
I feel like these tools still come with goodness and the opportunity to grow community and grow knowledge. You just have
yeah,
to have a really important amount of digital literacy and awareness. And so,
I
yeah,
I think that something happens to human beings when they get behind the keyboard. For some reason, we all start to think that we cease to exist and this persona takes over, right? It's the joke of that you've seen it in science fiction for years, and maybe that's the problem, is that when you're online, you're an avatar, you're not yourself anymore.
yeah,
And when people let that inhibition go, all of a sudden they become something they would never be if you were face to face, right? What's particularly scary to me is you're starting to see those avatars on the street.
yeah,
They're
yeah,
they're feeling they're
yeah.
feeling empowered by this experience of being on Twitter yelling at people all day.
Mhm.
And so they figure, oh, good, now I can take this out in the street because this is who I am. And it's like, is this really who you are? Or is
Yeah,
this really who you want to be? Is more the
right,
question, right?
right. And that's I have a very good friend who lives in town with me who met me on Twitter, and she told me that when she and I started talking, she mentioned to her husband, is she really this nice? Or is she just a total fake? And she's like, you really are who you are on digital. And I didn't believe it was possible. And I do believe that I have taught for years that the way you behave online is who you are. And so be you, because if you fake it, you can't make it. And I
Yeah.
think you're right that transition of digital to in person, if you're faking it long enough online, you're going to end up transitioning it into your true self. And I'm
Yeah.
definitely seeing that.
Yeah, your sense of shame seems to go away, right? Because I mean, the things that keep us, let's be honest about it, the things that keep us behaving well as human beings, aside from what's in our heart, is not wanting to be that person, right? Or not, how we want to present ourselves, because that's how people react back to us.
Yeah.
And when there's no face and there's no real personal attachment, hey, I got 600 friends on Twitter, and I know 3 of them, which is funny because a Facebook story, when I started on Facebook, I jumped in really early. As soon as it went from being a college student thing to opening up to the public, I was exploring these things. I was at CBS at the time. Then we met around that same era. And I was just exploring social media. So I joined Twitter when Twitter started up. And then I literally sat with doing nothing on my Twitter account for about 10 years before I went back and looked at it again. And I joined Facebook, and I actually curated my friends. So I can honestly say, when I look at my list, and I probably got 500-600 people who I'm involved with on Facebook, I have in some way, shape, or form had a one-on-one conversation with every single one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Because I looked at Facebook like I'd look for somebody who lives in Europe, because I wanted to have a pen pal kind of person that I could communicate with. So what's it like living in Europe, and where do you live, and what do you do, and actually have a dialogue about it. And most people, I don't think, do that, right? They have their close circle that they're connected to because they know them, and that's how they connected, and then just a bunch of people that they're hoping to put something over on.
Yeah. It's I know that I joined this is so nerdy. I was the one professor that could say at Mizzou, I was the first professor on Facebook at Mizzou. And for a very long time, it was not a very productive space, other than me telling students, you should be producing a newscast, get off Facebook. Now it's kind of just a common sidebar of activity. But back then, that just wasn't as productive, or not productive. I don't know. It was not.
Yeah. I'm not sure, to be honest, unless you're using it for marketing, right? Which we do sometimes. I'm not sure Facebook is ever productive. I'm not sure
there was a time
ever truly was. It was I don't
know.
I don't know. For me, it's been a distraction. So my social media is sliced up into portions of my life, right? So Facebook is the general. I keep track of old friends there, because there've been a couple of occasions in the last few years where it was kind of like, I don't want to deal with this anymore, so I'm going to go away. Mm-hmm. But I literally have friends on there from high school or people back east who I have never seen. I haven't seen in years and years and years. And the only place we keep up is through Facebook. Twitter is my political space. Mm-hmm. I'll say no more because some will like my political space and some won't. And then LinkedIn is the business side for me, right? I use that specifically for cultivating business contacts and that kind of thing. And I keep them all very distinctly separate, because honestly and truly, like if I'm applying for a job, I'll give them my LinkedIn, I'll give them my personal business or my personal website. I will never give anybody my Twitter or Facebook, because it's really none of their business. Now, at the same time, if they want, they can go out and find it anyway. It doesn't really matter. I'm not hiding any of it. I'm the kind of person who, I read something that really pisses me off, and I spend the next half hour writing this really long, angry response, and then I delete it. because I stop and say, okay, you got it out of your system. You are not going to say that in the town square. And that's how it was for me. I used to try to get this across to my mom. She was an 80-something-year-old lady who had to be on Facebook. And I kept trying to explain to her that what you're doing is getting up on top of a van in the middle of Times Square at noon with a bullhorn. Okay? You can't take it back. Everybody's going to hear it, and most people don't give a damn. Okay? So why not curate yourself a little bit and think about what you really mean or want to say? But she was like, no, I'm just an old lady and I'm angry and I'm going to get it out of my system. Like, okay.
Okay. Yep.
And that sums up social media. I think in some cases, it's full of angry people who have an opportunity to get,
Yeah.
or at least Twitter. Let's
I would
say
say,
at
I
least
have to
Twitter.
say, with the last 6 months, so my career did move to outside of higher ed for a little bit. I worked at A.A.R.P as their social media trainer. I trained from the C-suite all the way down to the volunteer level on how to use these tools. That was I started that in 2012. And so I was there for 5.5 years and really got that whole entire organization to a point where everyone understood the personal and professional uses. And then I
Okay.
transitioned to a strategist to help with the digital messages from the national to all of the state level, which A.A.R.P has an office in every state, Puerto Rico and Virgin Islands. And
Okay.
I spent a lot of time helping hone strategy and consistency. And when that job ended, I took strategy and consistency back to Mizzou and built a strategic communication process around social media accounts that the university had never had before. So for the last 2.5 years, I've been riding a very interesting wave of a national university brand and also
Okay.
taken it into this crisis mode. And I am now about to leave and run my own consultancy and I also have a nonprofit that I built with my daughter, and that those two elements will be my main focus starting October 15th. But
Okay.
the one thing I think I've learned a lot in the last 6 months managing dueling pandemics of viral and race, and so many different types of crisis around those two things that have led to all kinds of things I've had to help manage. I
Yeah.
am seeing a cycle of emotions that churn case by case, but there's a consistency that I've seen, and it always starts with a base of anger. The
Yeah.
first thing you respond to something catastrophic and unplanned is anger. And then there's sadness, and then there's acceptance. The problem is that we have so many of these things happening at the same time that the
Yeah.
cycle of anger, sad, acceptance is so constant. It's
Yeah.
up, down, up, down. That I don't even know if anyone has had the time to even reflect on that
Yeah.
cycle because I think we
Yeah.
all hit them. Because I've seen so much of it lately, I've actually caught myself in that, and I'm like, oh, I'm doing it
Yeah.
too. Oh my gosh, I am
Yeah.
so angry right now. I'm going to give myself some space to get to sad before I speak.
Yeah. I know. I'm with you. It's like being on a constant adrenaline rush that you can't get off of.
Yeah.
The last 4 years, especially. I mean, it's been. I can't blame it all on Trump, but he exacerbates it to
Mm-hmm.
such an extreme. We've been heading down this path for a while now with our national politics, and the last couple of years, especially 2020, because when the pandemic dropped in, it was like, holy crap, what else? You
Yeah.
know,
Well,
um, it's been day after day after day of I can't get away from this to the point where, and it it affects you physically as well, right? I
mm-hmm.
don't sleep very well anymore. It's all of that kind of stuff is stacking up. So I want you to talk about the nonprofit, but before we get there, I want to talk about media. Being you're a media person, right?
Yeah.
How how much of pushing things forward instead of bringing them back down to a calmer state is coming from mainstream media, and is so there's a part of me, and I've noticed this over many years, right? Both living in LA, living in New York, that local media especially has this ability to control the rhythm of a crisis.
Yes.
So, as an example, in 1992 in Los Angeles, after the Rodney King trial was over, we had riots.
Yes.
Um, and the riots broke out. They were very violent. Um, there are political aspects of this, like the police department was kind of paramilitary at the time, and the chief of police kind of pulled back the police when the riots started because he was sort of sending the message of, okay, you want to see what the city looks like without strong police? But what I noticed was the media went into, 24/7 mode at that point. Helicopters over the streets, looking at the fires and the fighting and everything that was going on. And this went on for 3 or 4 days until the governor finally brought in the National Guard. And when the National Guard showed up, all of a sudden the news started to take a break. They started to say, okay, National Guard's here. We can all step back. Everything's going to be fine. And I mean, as the coverage died down, as it went from 24/7 constantly beating on your head, things quieted down. It helped that there were troops in the streets, I guess, but there was a definitive flow to the way the whole thing ran, and it played out on TV. Now, LA is one of those news markets where, hey, we put helicopters up in the air when there's a high-speed chase going through the streets and runs for 3 hours on the local stations. So, we're a little over the top to start with.
Yeah.
But what do you think about that, and how that's contributing to how we all feel these days?
I think that national media has so many places to share its information. And I think the local media has the same. I think each person has now grown to have access to information in so many different ways that as that has grown, I think I mentioned before, there is a lack of literacy, media literacy in our country.
Yeah.
Nobody is
Yes.
teaching the importance of check, verify, and double check. And it's actually something I preached at A.A.R.P about the importance of taking advantage of the generation that may not have to go to work, 9 to 5, that they could be supporting the younger generation that also has more time to create content and share and post. And back we used to live near each other, and so the grandparents often would help with the younger generation while the middle generation was working. I really believe that there is an opportunity still for the generations to support each other, but it is more around digital literacy than actual in-person care. And I think that we really missed that opportunity. And it could start any time, but there would have to be a true desire for a national literacy around making good choices and not just sharing. And the importance that these channels are not just new, these are a part of our daily society, and that our media outlets should be supporting and funding literacy and not only sharing information, but then maybe even behind the scenes, how did we gather this information? Let's help you understand what goes into us telling you our reporting, just to help guide more literacy around what journalism is versus opinion. And
Thank you. You nailed it right there. You totally nailed it right there.
There's so much more literacy needed because opinion is not news. Opinion is opinion. But our general society has decided that opinion is fact. And there's such a lacking in literacy that there's no one pushing back and saying, what? That's not, there isn't enough care for the literacy.
It's how we've started to package it, right? I've said that one of the worst things that ever happened in media was the TV show 60 Minutes was successful because 60 Minutes was the first time that you blended entertainment and news into a single program on TV. And it got high ratings, and therefore it proved that news was no longer a loss leader. It could be a profit center. All of the when things like the fairness doctrine and all began to drop away, and the networks started to feel less of an obligation to paying back the citizenry for use of the airwaves, all of a sudden news changed, right?
Yeah.
And what my preaching to people, and I've had this conversation a lot even, is there's journalism and there's entertainment. Okay. You put on MSNBC, as good as their people are, and as good as the information that at times they can provide is, they are entertainment.
Yeah.
You go to, in the case of TV, I will give Lester Holt and the NBC nightly news credit. Those guys are journalists. People who are bringing you facts without bias attached to it are journalists, because that's what a journalist does.
Right.
People who are commenting on those facts are entertaining you.
Yes.
And an outlet like NBC has the ability to split the two, right? Because they can do nightly news on the network and then they can have MSNBC to do their thing. But an outlet like Fox doesn't, because they're a single channel.
Yep.
So you go right from having a Shepard Smith, who's actually a fairly reasonable journalist in the way he presented his news, or even Chris Wallace, right, into Sean Hannity. And that really blurs the line between what's real and what's not. And most people don't understand it. You're absolutely right about it being a literacy problem. And then, of course, the other problem for me is it's too easy to never go to see anything that doesn't meet your own beliefs already, right? We no longer challenge people to challenge their own beliefs.
Right. Because at this point, it's become so contentious.
Yeah.
And I mean, I will be honest. I will be flat out honest. I have tried to keep my circles wide enough to listen and learn from other perspectives, but I shut it down this year because because the contentious level became deadly.
Yeah, I get it. No, I totally get it. I've tried very hard to go out of my way to watch both sides. I will go and put on Fox from time to time. And then I watch either CNN or MSNBC a lot. Again, I like listening to Rachel Maddow talk. She's very smart. And so I'll do that. But when it was the conventions, right? The political conventions this year, I put on C-SPAN.
Yes.
Because it's completely unbiased. It's like
no commentary.
Okay, Democratic convention starting, click, and then that's it. And that's typically what I do. When I want to try to distill the reality, I look for the least biased news source to get it, or I try to watch both. But I'm with you, and the vitriol is so high. Do you think that if we had something like the fairness doctrine still in place, it wouldn't be this way?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think with the current access to these digital tools that I have started with from the very, very beginning, I don't think it would have stopped that from happening. I do think that it may have happened slower.
Okay.
Because a national media outlet has more of that freedom to continue to or start it and then it spreads, or it starts somewhere else and they spread it. It's I really I don't think it would have stopped this from happening. How about that? I don't think so.
Okay.
I think that the blur has happened so dramatically at this point that there's no way to go back to just the simplicity of fairness doctrine. I really think it's so funny. I have been talking about the importance of digital literacy since since 2005. And how, as this has changed so rapidly, that no one is really pinpointing that as a pain point or a solution. It has to be. It has to be if our country is going to survive whatever we're in right now, if we want to continue to be a free society.
Let's move on to something different. Tell me about Born Just Right.
So Born Just Right, it started out as a blog. And it's called Born Just Right because my daughter, who's now 14, was born with just a right hand.
I didn't realize it was that precise. I was following your blog back in the day, but that's interesting.
Yeah, so she's born just right, and she's just born just right-handed. And back in 2005, as I was emerging in these digital spaces as a professional, when she was born, I suddenly needed these tools to try to, as a journalist, figure out resources that may not exist or did exist across the country to try to make sure that I got what she needed physically and mentally. And I didn't even know a child could be born with a limb difference in the first place. So I was emerging in these different digital tools as a professional, and suddenly I had a very, very personal need for it. And so I started the blog because there weren't resources out there. And as a journalist, I figured, you know what, I'm just going to report out what I'm learning, and maybe I'll find a community. And I built a community around it. And social media tools have come with me along the way. And so throughout the years, we would have meetups with readers, and we started working with a prosthetist in Chicago, and I started getting to know the blogging community over there. And I kind of grew as a digital communicator, not just as a professional, but as a personal blogger, in a space that just had, at the time, there was no one really talking about parenting around disability. I don't know if a
Yeah.
lot of people were talking about disability. And so I've grown, and my children have grown. I have a son who's 3.5 years older than her as well. They grew up with a mom who shared their stories online, which there's a lot of controversy around that. So because, once again, everything I've tried to do is at the
Right.
base of it is for good. We have not done the blog thing to get stuff for free, but we did it to
Right.
we did it to grow a community. We did it to meet others and
Yeah.
really learn and grow. And so with that outcome, and anytime I would have a family member reach out to me and say, thank you, I don't feel alone anymore, our whole family would go,
Yeah.
I'm so glad we're doing this. We're so proud to have a space to help others. So the goal of I will say this straight out, to have that as the goal comes from privilege. To have had a job that paid my bills while I could also be a storyteller comes from privilege. And the ability to focus on impact and not income comes from privilege. I feel very blessed that I've been able to ride the
Yeah.
wave of mom blogging and digital storytelling in a way that did not have a core need of income. And so we did very much grow that community through an organic process and not a money process, which is,
Yeah.
I think, very unusual. Which I think is why what our work has impacted and what we've been able to do, especially in the last 4 years, almost 5 years, comes from a very unusual space, of a very unusual process. So because we were within this sector of disability that is currently, well, at the time was very parent driven. And honestly, a lot of disability from one side of things is parent driven and not disability driven. That's where I started. In the last 4 years, my daughter, who's now 14, started to find her voice as a member of the disability community. And I have helped support that. And I've watched what was a blog become a nonprofit. And we've done that together. And it comes from a very strange way, and it comes from glitter.
Ah, yes.
And it happened because of the blog. We were invited to bring Jordan to San Francisco to participate in a 1-week workshop where kids with upper limb differences had a chance to design based on their physical difference. And what could you do if you could build anything on your little arm was pretty much the challenge. And there were some special things about that workshop. It was focused on the child and their own personal experience and learning to design based on themselves. And parents were not allowed in the room. And that combination led to my daughter designing a prosthetic arm that shoots glitter.
Yes, I've seen it.
And
I have.
yeah,
I have been
you've
shot
been
with it.
shot with it. We do use biodegradable glitter, and which cleans off a lot better than the regular stuff, I've learned. That experience, because I was also a storyteller, became a viral sensation, not at the hugest level, but it went viral a couple of times. And watching my daughter start to see the response to her experience gave her the chance to speak about being a member of the disability community and to talk about how it's not negative. It is a positive perspective, and it also offers design and STEM perspectives that may not be considered a good thing. It's actually a fantastic thing, and it offers so much more potential. You bring disability into any genre, and you have new perspective.
What I found
new
fascinating
ideas.
watching, because I kind of been watching from afar, right, is how it's not just about empowerment from what I've seen coming from it, but it's also about And not only are you empowered to be whatever you want to be, let me show you some of the things you can do. And Project Unicorn, which is the limb, is all about STEM, right? It's all about how do you design it? How do you build it? How do you make it work? It's all about the engineering side of things. And it's been fascinating to watch and to watch her growth going through that.
Yeah, and from that experience, she had had opportunities to speak at events with the Health and Human Services during Maker Week, National Maker Week in DC, and she really appreciated the opportunities, and I did too. And when November of 2016 happened, and she was a ball of goo crying, and all she could say is, "What's going to happen to people who are different?" And I said to her that night, looked her in the eye, and I said, let's use the privilege that we have to help others from the opportunities that have come your way. What's fascinating is that in January the next year, she was speaking at NYU. She was doing live interviews on local New York City television. And then she was invited to show off her invention to to the Shark Tank on the Rachel Ray show. And suddenly she had literary agents wanting to help her tell her story in a book. Suddenly she's doing TEDx talks. It grew. And at that when we had made that agreement in November, we started the process of turning the blog into a nonprofit. And so as those moments started to emerge that were very organic and wild to evolutions of her wanting to get a different view and conversation around disability, we launched a nonprofit so that workshops like where she created Project Unicorn could happen more often. And not only happen for kids with upper limb differences, we started looking for ways to take that workshop and develop ways for kids with physical disabilities to learn to design for themselves and not just upper limb differences. And looking for ways to expand opportunity for kids with disabilities. Now we have a program director. We have an official workshop. It's called Boost by Born Just Right. Some of our workshop attendees have helped co-found a youth consultancy, a design consultancy, because in the end, we're helping kids with disabilities learn to get paid.
Yeah.
I want them to get paid. And so the youth design consultancy is a chance for when an organization comes to me and says, hey, can you review this concept, or can someone speak at our event? I have students who have now evolved with their interests that they want to they are passionate around the world of disability design and awareness. And so it's really stunning and fabulous to watch. They just released a report asking the engineering world to think more about prosthetic design. It's called something like don't give me more fingers.
Yeah.
Because they don't need fingers, they need tools that help solve a problem, meet the needs. In that process, we did release a book called Born Just Right. It's a middle school chapter book. It's written in Jordan's 11-year-old voice. She's 14 now. That we wrote together. It was released last summer, and this year the paperback came out. She was featured in episode 1 of Marvel's Hero Project. You can see our workshop in motion. We did an event with Microsoft in Cambridge. She got to work on a hackathon, the whole new idea with a Hack for Good program with Microsoft volunteers this summer. She consulted with not just her. Mostly her, but I helped with some language. But she consulted with Barbie doll designers and helped release a prosthetic leg wearing doll. And the big aha for the designers and the incredible importance that in the end, this is really the message that she and all of our students are sending is do not create things for communities.
Yeah.
Create them with. And that word with is why that doll has a removable leg. Because if they had not taken the time to talk to Jordan and have her explain the experience of a person with a limb difference, they would have assumed that a person wears a prosthetic leg all the time. And that doll could just
color
have
plastic
a different
on the bottom half
leg.
of the leg, and that would have been it. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. But that's not the reality. The reality is a prosthetic leg is like a shoe. You wear it when you need it. You're not going to wear it all the time. And that was such an aha moment in that room. It was so stunning to watch every adult in the room go, oh,
that's awesome. Oh. That's really cool.
Jordan's invention and another invention from one of our Boost workshops were on display at the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago for an exhibit called Wire to Wear. Project Unicorn is still there. They have a smaller version of it this year in the museum. And she helped open that exhibit. Now my goal is, it's hard work. This is emotional and physical work to change the needle. And it's it's a big reason why I'm trying to launch my own consultancy so that I can give more time to my, it's a small nonprofit. And we're working to try to make it a well-funded nonprofit. And Jordan is working. She's a KEDS ambassador this year. She had a chance to help design a shoe and give input and learn from shoe designers. She's next week you'll hear a campaign that she's working on with another company. I am making sure that she's not just using her energy for free anymore, because this is hard work.
That's amazing. I was watching you running around all over the world at the end of last year before the pandemic kicked in, doing all of these different events. And I was like, the amount of energy you guys have just to be able to do that and still, it seems, maintain some normalcy of life at the same time, right? I mean, Jordan's still a kid who's just entered high school or in her first year of high school, right? So all of that still has to happen as well. So it's pretty impressive.
Yeah. And that's, her bandwidth had started to slow this year anyways. And so that may be the only gift of the pandemic, is that she needed to slow down.
Yeah.
And so she was able to, and focus on just being 14.
It's important. It's really important. So how is the family in general holding up in the midst of all of this?
Well, Cameron moved to college in August, and he's here locally. He lives in a dorm 3 miles away. He's extraordinarily isolated. We had hoped that 2 of his classes out of 5 would be in person, and at the start of the semester, none of them
he's living on
person.
Campus in a dorm, but all of his classes are remote?
Right. So we sent Cameron off to college, put him in a dorm, and thought that he would have 2 of his 5 classes in person so that he'd have a little bit of interaction with his peers. And my hope was that living in a dorm would give him access to a little bit of college life. He's gotten very little of that. His roommate moved out because he was very, very anxious about the viral spread and just needed to go home because he was local as well. My son now lives in his dorm room by himself, which has its health benefits. We have weekly meetings. His sister and I meet up with him for dinner once a week. We eat outside, and we have rules where we mask up around each other, but we hang out at a distance. I don't know if you saw, the New York Times came up with healthy ways to hug. So we do COVID hugs where the heads are pointed in different directions, and he's now much taller than me, so I feel very comfortable with a hug with heads in different directions. So he's getting his hugs, which I really feel passionate that that's important for him, and he agrees. Hugs are important. And having a little bit of weekly human touch point. He just reconnected with some of his elementary school friends who are also going to college with him, and they have been doing some distance lunches together. So I do think there's a benefit of being a local at a very large university. But he's the things he's missing, and to be a kid who grew up in a college town, he knows what he's missing.
My daughter Allison started college this year at Cal State Long Beach, and she's a musician. She's studying music ed and performance, and so they're all online. And it looks like they're going to be online for the whole year at this point. Again, she missed out that opportunity to be in the dorm and to finally get out of her parents' house and have that independence. And she's got the added challenge these days of she can't perform with other musicians in the same room. And that's just absolutely driving her crazy. It does. 2020 is definitely the one for the books. So what do you think the next 6 months look like for you?
Well, I'm moving into a communications consultancy zone of life. I am thrilled to be working with some incredible nonprofits. And I hope that I can continue to focus on the nonprofit and foundation spaces in the world where so much good is needed. And communication skills for these organizations. Maybe they don't have the funds for a full-time person. I'm really hoping I can help support that. I think that 6 months from now will not be much different around our current physical selves. I think distancing and masking and things like that are imperative for us to make any changes. I hope that you publish this before the election, because I have no idea after that, because I have a lot of concerns. And once again, feeling very privileged to live in a separate house that is not near an urban center. I already have a vote plan. I don't know what's to come for our country. I don't know.
I'm probably silly, but I still have a core faith in this country and in its people. And I think that we figured out what we did wrong and we're going to make a right decision to correct and go forward. I try very hard not to get political, Randy, but...
I don't know if there's I don't think we can be apolitical right now. For us to forward our society without calling out what is a disaster in our political system right now.
I agree.
It's
definitely been interesting times in the true sense of the curse. That's for sure. What are you looking forward to the most when things return to whatever the new normal becomes, assuming this isn't it?
I definitely don't want it. I don't want to go back to what it was. I definitely want to see us forwarding society and not retreating to what it was. I am really hopeful that racial equity will become a core to those who care about the furthering of our society. That we will base decisions with that in mind. We being anybody who cares. I would like to see my children having a chance to interact with new people again. I feel blessed that I have grown up in a digital space in the world where we did get to meet each other organically without suspicion. That I have made friends and relationships in person and online in ways that I just don't know if we can do that anymore. Maybe we can. But I think that there is going to be a base of suspicion and lack of trust for a while for us to be a full regular society again. And that's where I think really thinking about equity and community, that whole reason that Born Just Right is doing what it's doing is that focus on width. Width is something I try to think about all the time. Who do I need to work with? Who do I need to think about so that they are with this message or with this outcome? Who is being left without or is maybe not thought about yet or needs to be thought about? I'm trying really hard to be thoughtful. I hope I can continue to be thoughtful and still pay the bills. But in the meantime, while I have this privilege, I do want to hopefully forward the world where we are thinking about working with, not against, and improve so many things that are a real big mess right now.
Good message. Okay, I want to try to help you pay your bills. What's your consultancy website? Here's the plug.
It is justrightstrategy.com. And I'm Jen Lee Reeves everywhere on the internets. So that's JenLeeReeves, all the E's. I'm definitely on the internet in a lot of ways. I do believe that there is good in these spaces, and I have used those good things for a long, long time. And I'm still working to help organizations power through this negative time to do good with the tools and communications that we can use. And it's still possible. We just need to really up our literacy and use these tools for good. And that's where I'm at.
Awesome. Jen, thank you for taking the time out to talk to me.
Of course.